We are on our way to cover at least one of each type of dragon. We have covered red, blue, black, white, and green dragons from the chromatics, but for the metallics we have covered only one, the gold dragon Pelarandusk. And we will get there, of course. We will try and hit an important member of each type as best we can. However, you guys have shown great interest in some of the more esoteric types of dragons. As you all know, there are more than just chromatics and metallics. Steel dragons are an example of a special kind of dragon, a more unique style that can't quite be categorized with any of the others. Sundarisilim being a prime example of our kind, a dragon that seeks to live amongst humans as one of them and make the world a better place for a symbiotic living experience between both humans and dragons. Today, however, we're making our very first foray into a dragon type that you guys have been begging for me to cover for a very long time. Today, we're going to talk about our very first gem dragon, who also happens to be one of the most powerful dragons of all time, a challenge rating 34 emerald dragon. But before we get into it, only 1 week is left before my full 5th edition adventure finishes its run on Kickstarter. In Sands of Doom, the purchase and selling of magical items fuels the monetary power that the Tiefling Consortium holds over the capital city of Karat. As ruins are uncovered laying under the vast sands of the kingdom, powerful magical trinkets are unearthed and sold to the highest bidder. In this campaign, players possessing powerful magical items is expected, and the adventure is actually balanced towards it. Traveling through the great bazaars of the city will allow players to finally spend their money on magic, something that you have rarely ever seen in 5th edition. If you have seen my What They Don't Tell You About Magical Items PDF, then you know of what I speak. This adventure will allow players to spend their hard-earned gold on a lot of magical items, letting players further customize how their characters play and feel in combat, rather than just relying on their class and subclass. Further scattered in the kingdom are the Anubian relics, artifact-level magical items gifted with divine energy, symbols of power from the old religion of the Gnolls. The players are able to scout the lands in hopes of finding these relics, and if they do, they will be granted enormous power, rivaling that of some of the strongest villains in the campaign. If players are not able to find them, perhaps the villains will. Success or failure in this adventure relies on making sure that these holy emblems of a bygone era do not fall onto the wrong hands. Though of course, players' hands can also be the wrong hands, as some of these relics are so powerful they risk a player becoming too strong, shifting the balance of power in such a way that maybe those who you considered allies might betray you. Gifting these powerful relics to NPCs could be the solution and a way to gain further power to your side. How you play this adventure is up to you. You can be the savior of the land, or you could be a tyrant, forcing those beneath you to stand strong against the onslaught. You might even be able to become the ruler of all Karat if you play your cards right. Sands of Doom is a full 5th edition adventure for characters level 1 to level 11, and we only have 1 week left on Kickstarter. The link is in the video description down below. Now, back to the video. Quote, "A century ago, the huge emerald dragon known as the Silent Shadow could be seen at well nigh every important event in the Sword Coast North, gliding overhead, just watching. He never spoke and ignored most attempts to hail or attack him, serenely observing from an aloof distance and flying away when challenged, but otherwise always there, missing nothing. Some barbarians thought of him a watching spirit who reported to their own totem spirits or to strange gods. Some sages and mages considered him a spy in service to some sinister cabal, a belief encouraged by false confirmations announced by several sorcerers' brotherhoods seeking to impress others. In truth, Raulothim served only himself. He loved riding the high winds so prevalent over the north, and he hated missing anything. The Silent Shadow didn't care if he misinterpreted what he saw, or never learned the reasons or forces behind the events he witnessed. He just hated feeling left out and hence lonely. The years changed him, however, as years change all beings. These days, the great emerald worm called Raulothim seems more a statue than a gliding shadow. He spends long days lying motionless, gazing out over the north from the lip of his lair in the Pit of Stars, the cauldron of an extinct volcano known to the Netherese as Shardmount, on the rocky island of Axard, the northeasternmost isle of Raulothim. End quote. So, Raulothim is a very lonely emerald dragon that lives right here. This is a rocky island named Axard, in which there is a volcano called Shardmount. Underneath this volcano, there is a large labyrinthine cave network that opens in many places around the volcano, and this would be where the dragon typically lairs. Now, the caldera of the volcano is called the Pit of Stars, and it is so named for the many blobs of volcanic glass that line the walls. They are white, clear, and smoke-hued, and gleam in the sun like a bunch of gigantic gems. Now, Raulothim himself is quite relaxed when it comes to, people exploring the general island, so long as they stay far away from his caldera. His volcano is really the only place he cares about when it comes to what he would define as his territory. Now, Raulothim is, as many emerald dragons are, extremely curious, but also extremely distrustful. He wants to know everything that there is to know, but also that comes with a general distrust of people and monsters. He feels the need to constantly investigate people, to spy on others, to use any measure imaginable to safeguard itself from betrayals or attacks. Really, emerald dragons are meant to be as paranoid as beholders, but they seldom just simply kill others to increase their odds of survival. These are not inherently evil dragons after all. They do tend to have positive natures. In any case, his curiosity led him all across the continent. He just wanted to observe people, to see what was going on in the world. But then, something happened to Raulothim. He saw something that changed his life forever. What he saw was a portal from another world open, and from this portal came a flying ship with a crew that seemed alien to him, a race of people that he had never seen before, wielding clothes and weapons strange to him. What he saw was a spelljammer vessel. These are vessels that travel across the worlds in the prime material world, machines that allow one to travel the infinite openness that is reality. The vessel wasn't doing anything particularly exciting. The crew were simply finding what they thought was a desolate location on a random planet where they could bury some treasure that they had gotten illicitly. Unbeknownst to them, the dragon was watching them curiously. When they saw the dragon, they simply bolted and left through the same portal. But this event, for a lack of a better word, traumatized Raulothim, who thought he understood his place in the universe. He became terrified of what was out there. See, you grab a creature with a curiosity so potent that it drives him to know all that there is to know, and with a fear of others so potent that it leads him to safeguard himself from any creature that could harm him, and then you present him with a never-ending world filled with creatures that, doesn't matter how long you study them, you will never truly understand. The universe is far too big to learn what is out there, and the dangers are too grand for you to protect yourself against them. What happens is you make an emerald dragon mad. See, in spite of the futility of the task, Raulothim set himself to work. He started hiring as many mercenaries as he could, as many adventurers as he could dare solicit, and set them on a quest to protect the land against forces from beyond this world. He would have them scout many locations in which he would feel would be great for an enemy invasion. Permanent open portals would be reinforced, magical barriers would be enacted against very specific types of travel, traps would be set that would hopefully prevent similar spelljamming vessels from arriving anywhere near him. His paranoia just grew out of control, and now the great emerald dragon Raulothim sits paralyzed in fear of an enemy he cannot see. This fear, however, has pushed him far beyond his limits to accrue as much power as it is physically possible for him to do so. So what he's done is he has invaded many a wizard's tower, a lot of crypts, dungeons and all, in an effort to collect as much magic as he can. He goes out and purchases all he can afford, trades what he has for more magic, and then just kinda hoards it. Much of it he uses, of course, but the rest of it sits hidden away in vaults across the island, filled with traps so that none may ever find them. In his view, even if he can't use those magic items, they will never be used against him. In this process, Raulothim has collected one of the biggest magical item hoards in the continent. But even more interestingly, his collection of spells might be the best in the entirety of the world. We're talking, of course, wizard spells here. Whether we're looking at scrolls or spellbooks, Raulothim has about 400 wizard spells in total. The lore literally tells us that if you find a wizard spell of 5th level or lower, then you can just assume that Raulothim knows it. These would amount to about 300 of his spells, with the remaining 100 being spells of 6th level or higher, which he currently cannot cast. See, Raulothim has been practicing his wizardly magic within the last set of decades in hopes of becoming a more powerful magic user, and so far, he has gained the ability to cast up to 5th level, but not higher yet. Now, I should mention that we're just talking about wizardly magic here. Raulothim is an emerald dragon, which of course means that he is a natural psionic, and a really good one at that too. Raulothim functions as a 19th level psionic, so he can cast psionic spells of up to 9th level. Now, because God knows what the people that design 5th edition are doing, we don't have a psionic class for 5th edition yet, and probably we will never, because they're now making 6th edition, but once we start going in depth into Raulothim's stat sheet, we can talk about what some of those psionic features look like. But yes, Raulothim possesses virtually any spell imaginable of 5th level or lower, and hell, he might even possess that triptych spell that makes cloth so particularly dangerous. And I say that because Raulothim's signature move actually looks fairly similar to it. Raulothim always carries with him a giant bag filled to the brim with wands and staffs. According to the lore, he has a spell that lets them float semi-autonomously. And so he flies to one side as the magic items fly onto the other in an effort to create a form of pincer move against his enemies. Now, whether the floating ones shoot their magic on their own, or as a free action or a full action is unclear. We just know that as well as having a collection of spells and magic items, he also has an extensive collection of command words for magic items, and that he uses his great memory to expertly use the correct command word for all of the magic items that he possesses. But like I said, it is very likely that Raulothim does possess that dangerous triptych spell that Cloth uses, so I wouldn't be surprised if he could activate 3 of these staffs with a single action. This lore, as well as Cloth's lore, was written by Ed Greenwood, who of course created the Forgotten Realms, so this is as true a lore as it gets. Now, alongside this bag filled with wands and staffs, Raulothim also always carries a ring. Now, I don't know what this ring does or why it is important, but it is noted that he carries it, and it is confusing because no further mention is ever made of it. Here, let me read you the passage. Quote, "The Worm of Axart always wears the ring, or rather always wears a plain brass ring. Some sages believe he possesses and alternates several magical rings," end quote. So he always wears the ring. They call it the ring. But then they further clarify, calling it just a plain brass ring. And then they further sow confusion by saying that some sages believe that he alternates magical rings. So like, which one is it? There is only ever one mention of a ring in this whole lore, and it is a magical item that is within his collection. Quote, "Raulothim's collection of battle-worthy magical items is known to include rods of flailing, lordly might, smiting, and terror, a staff of power, and 2 staffs of thunder and lightning, 4 wands of fire, 3 wands of frost, and at least 1 of each wand of lightning, paralyzation, and polymorphing, as well as a javelin of lightning, and a ring that can unleash 1 dispel magic and 2 reverse gravity spells per day, and several enchanted swords," end quote. So the only mention of a ring is this one particular magical ring that can cast 1 dispel magic and 2 reverse gravity spells per day. No other rings are mentioned, so it is safe to assume it is probably this ring that they're referring to, which means he always carries it with him, which is, I guess, good to know. It's just weird the way that they wrote it further into the passage. Now, in terms of his stats and abilities, his 3rd edition sheet shows he had about 670 hit points. However, If we were to use the underlying 5th edition rules for a challenge rating 34 monster, he would instead have around 1,000 hit points, specifically between 982 to 1,026 hit points. He has 39 strength, 12 dexterity, 27 constitution, 29 intelligence, 27 wisdom, and 26 charisma. On top of normal dragon movement, he also has a swimming speed. He's immune to paralysis, sleep, and psionics. So see, back in the day, we had sonic damage, which was effectively just sound damage. Nowadays, that is basically just thunder damage, though I don't really even know how much of that is true. Thunder damage has always been weird in 5th edition because it is sometimes described as concussive damage, like an explosion, which we sometimes also attribute to force damage, even though force damage has nothing to do with the force of a blast, and instead it is simply non-elemental magical damage. But anyhow, things can get pretty weird. Raulothim is immune to sound damage because sound is one of the core elements of the Emerald Dragons. See, this is the perfect time for me to remind you once again that many of the books that Dungeons & Dragons releases are not Forgotten Realms lore. Fizbank's Treasury of Dragons is not a Forgotten Realms book. It is a generic fantasy book that can be used in any setting, but does conflict quite a bit with both pre-established general D&D lore and with Forgotten Realms lore. The Emerald Dragons from Fizbank are not the Emerald Dragons from the Forgotten Realms. In the Forgotten Realms, Emerald Dragons have what you call a sonic energy breath weapon attack. They breathe a 60-foot cone of sonic energy that looks and feels like a loud, keening wail which sets up sonic vibrations in the air. These vibrations become painful to creatures in the area, forcing them to take what used to be sonic damage, but now probably would be thunder damage, and then become deafened for some time. In 2nd edition, it further used to stun you, so it was a bit stronger back then. Because of the ability for the Emerald Dragon to manipulate sound, they were themselves immune to any form of attack that relied on a similar mechanic. Further, Emerald Dragons are also completely immune to fire, at least natural fire. These dragons, as you know, do make their lairs in volcanoes and their calderas, and so they have the natural ability to be able to walk on lava and withstand all of that natural heat. When it came to magical fire damage, like those from spells and such, they were merely resistant to it, which is still pretty good. But yeah, going back to Raulothim, like many dragons, he has a ton of general proficiencies, but he had an expertise specifically in cartography and trap making. Trap making, of course, as a paranoid Emerald Dragon, he keeps his lair basically unassailable by adventurers, and cartography has always been something of a hobby and passion of his, at least back when he used to fly around the north of Faerun. Selling his maps to nobles is actually how he made most of his money originally, money that he now spends to hire mercenaries. He also has an extreme expertise in just general knowledge of the north of Faerun. Just as Arviturus knows everything that there is to know about the coast, the sea, and the weather of Faerun, probably knows more about that than any other being on the continent, Raulothim is the same, but for the land. There is probably no one alive in Faerun that knows more about general random trivia than Raulothim. Now, because of how well connected Emerald Dragons are to the inner planes, Raulothim can pass instantly from the material plane onto the inner planes at will. He can do this as many times as he wants. In terms of spells prepared, like I said before, just assume that he has all wizard spells of 5th level or lower on his spell books. And then a bunch of spell scrolls for about 40 or so spells of 6th level or higher. Here you can see which psionic spells he has access to. Most of these you won't recognize, of course, since they haven't been released in 5th edition. I'm actually in the process of creating my monster classes for, which is going to include something very similar to the Beholder, the UNT, and the Mind Flayer. Legally, I can't say that they are the Beholder, the UNT, or the Mind Flayer, but they're very similar. And I'll be reworking many of these old psionic spells into a 5th edition equivalent, specifically for those of you who want to play something like the Mind Flayer. Anyways, there are many subclasses for psionics in D&D, and Raulothim is specifically what you would call a clairsentience discipline subclass. These types of psionics can learn secrets long forgotten, can glimpse into the future, find hidden objects, and know what is normally unknowable. In a lot of ways, they basically gain powers similar to wizards who study under the divination school of magic. Now, out of all of the myriad of secret spells that Raulothim has access to, we know 2 spells unique to him that are extremely cool. The first one is Force Barb. Force Barb is a 3rd level spell that creates a sort of magical beaming tail behind you that ends in a sphere. The dragon can smack someone with that sphere as if they were an ankylosaurus. If it hits, the target takes lightning damage and then must make a save or risk becoming paralyzed. Once you hit twice with the spell then ends. Now what is cool is that if you hit a shield spell with it, it doesn't just go through the shield spell, but it also destroys it. Further, if a Dispel Magic or just really any kind of spell that would seek to eliminate Force Barb attempts to do so, then both spells mutually destroy each other, so long as the spell was a 4th level or lower. Apparently, the visual effect of both spells counteracting each other is meant to be spectacular. Now, the second exclusive spell that Raulothim knows is actually so good. Shimmer Mantle is a 4th level abjuration spell that is actually unbelievable. The spell creates a shimmering aura that surrounds you and moves with you. The aura has an amount of hit points equal to 2 times the level of the caster to a maximum of 22. So if you're damaged by anything, but the damage is lower than the hit points of the aura, then you simply become immune to that damage. You just don't take any damage. But if the damage is higher than the HP of the aura, then you take the damage and the aura is destroyed. Also, at the end of every round that your aura was tested with damage, it loses 1 hit point. Further, you can regain hit points to the aura by using the spell Magic Missiles. Any magic missiles casted by you or casted towards you become absorbed by the aura, regaining hit points equal to the damage done by the missiles, presumably up to a maximum of 22. On top of all of this, you also become completely immune to lightning damage for so long as you have this aura, though you also can't use any lightning spells since the aura would absorb it. This thing is amazing, or at least it feels like it would be. I suppose all it takes would be an attack that deals more than 22 damage and your aura is just basically wasted, but yeah, pretty good otherwise. There's also apparently a 5th level variant that allows you to not just make the aura invisible so enemies can't see it, but it also lets you cast it onto another target so someone other than you can use it. Really good, and this is just a taste of all of the exotic spells that Raulothim has access to. One of Raulothim's current magical obsessions is a spell called Bloodfire, one of the scariest spells in Dungeons & Dragons. So, a while ago, a wizard from Myth Draenor created this spell, Bloodfire, which allowed him to keep control of his apprentices and prevent them from ever betraying him. So the spell seeps into your being and resists any and all attempts to remove it. If the spell gets on you, it just simply cannot be removed. And at any point that the caster wants, whether it is a day later or 60 years later, the caster can decide to activate the effect, and the target will then have its blood turn to liquid fire and burn alive. And again, nothing that you can do to remove it works. It's kind of like the open hand monk feature, Quivering Palm, but you can cast this on as many people as you desire. It is an obscenely scary spell, believed to be either an 8th or 9th level spell. The only caveat to it though is that for you to cast this onto a person, that person must be willing. At least only willing at the time of the cast. Now, the wizard that created it was afraid that his apprentices would betray him, and so in exchange for him accepting the task of teaching them magic, he would ask them to accept the casting of the spell, basically. And this is a spell that Raulothim has been drooling over for a while now. He has been so paranoid with all of the people that he has been forced to hire that he doesn't let anyone get close to him. But unfortunately, the spell was stolen by the original wizard by one of his own daughters, and the wizard is now dead, exploded from a magical experiment gone wrong. And so Raulothim has been looking for this lady for years to learn this spell, but no sign of her for now. And the thing is, Raulothim is starting to feel the pressure, especially so because as of late, there has been a tremendous amount of warriors coming to seek Raulothim's magical treasure hoard. All of them are dead, of course, killed by the dragon, but this just makes his paranoia grow even bigger. The lore states that so far, 40 adventuring groups have made their way here to hunt the dragon. If we assume that each adventuring group is about 4 people on average, then over 160 adventurers have recently died trying to steal his treasure. And these were no slouches either. Many of them were named bands who had been working together for a while. There were the Robes of Doom, the Bendiver's Talons, the Bold Broadswords of Mirabar, and more. We're not even counting the individual thieves who came by on their own. There are a lot of people who have their eyes trained on the dragon and his loot. And so far, all of them have been unsuccessful. Now, this is happening mostly because there is one particular goddess who is pissed. We are, of course, talking about Mystra, the goddess of magic. See, when we talked about Dargothoth being protected by Mystra, it was because Dargothoth is actively creating new spells. He's enchanting and making new magic, and that Mystra loves very much. But what Raulothim is doing is he's going out into the world, taking magic that others have made and then hoarding it and not letting anyone get access to it. Now that Mystra very much doesn't like. Because of this, Mystra has been asking her clerics and chosen to leave trails, clues, and maps, leading adventurers onto where the dragon is in hopes that they can take some of that magic away from the dragon, but so far they have been unsuccessful. But no wonder Raulothim is so paranoid. With this kind of stress and with the spell Bloodfire being no closer to him than when he started looking for it, Raulothim has been contemplating other means of staying alive. Means that might result in far more dangers to the people of the world. I get this a lot in my comments, but sometimes people wonder, like, why don't these dragons simply cast something like the clone spell, for example, and then become invincible that way? Well, for one, these spells are not meant to be accessible to people. Normal archwizards just don't have it. We're kind of spoiled in D&D because we can just choose it when we level up, but in the world of D&D, someone has to teach it to you, or you have to develop it on your own and create it yourself. And these are really complicated spells. Finding a clone spell is absolutely wild, and well, you can guess who has one. Raulothim has a very specific type of clone spell. It is the exact same one that was created by Manchun. Maybe one day we will cover him, but just know that there is a long process of magical tinkering that has to be done in order to twist a spell that was specifically intended for a human to become usable by a dragon. It is not quite as easy as just casting the spell clone, but further, he also requires a lot of time in order to gain the ability to, cast such a high-level wizard spell, and so he has been working on that. Elminster believes that in only about 20 years or so, Raulothim should be able to either find a way to cast a clone spell, or if not, find a way to become a lich in order to prolong his existence. Whatever he has to do to survive, Raulothim is going to do. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Click the link in the video description to check out my Sands of Doom 5th edition adventure currently on Kickstarter. With only a week left, we are running out of time. If we can make it to 210,000, I will add an entire new chapter for desert magic onto the campaign. There are a lot of really cool desert spells in old school D&D that were not brought over to 5th edition, and I would love to redesign them so that you can get access to them. Once again, click the link in the video description to check out my Sands of Doom adventure. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you all on the next one.